Hello and welcome back. Bonjour to you all tuning in for the French Open Daily Dose on the Chris McPherson Show. This will be our final Daily Dose preview. We might try and get back together and do a little bit of a review after everything wraps up, but we're going to package together your men's and women's finals and a couple of other mentions for some others on the way through. But of course, you will notice I am rejoined by Christian Montigan from the First Serve. Christian, our schedules align again, thankfully.
Thankfully, right in time before the singles finals, I was got some doubles action as well. So yeah, just in time to dissect it all and review everything.
Yeah, we certainly are. As you said, the men's and women's doubles are coming to a head. Sarah Irani and Jasmine Paolini will be very short favourites in the women's. The men's doubles final, if I'm not mistaken, is the same night as the women's singles, and that'll be the fifth seeds, the Barlos and Granolas versus Salisbury and Skupski. For the majority of our fans being Aussie fans, not a lot of stories in it. We were talking before, the women's doubles ended up being a very lopsided draw. Irani and Paolini will go in as very short favourites, as I said, and probably reasonably evenly balanced in the men's. Just to note that Zabalos and Granolas have had quite a break in the lead up to theirs. I don't have too many other talking points. I don't know if you've got anything else you want to touch on.
Not really in terms of the doubles. I mean, we know Irani and Paolini are so strong in the doubles, aren't they? They've obviously won the gold medal last year at the Olympics and won a slam or two as well, partnering together. And we saw obviously Irani and Vavasori partner for the mixed doubles title just a couple of days ago. So like Irani is just such a good player on the doubles court. She knows that cohesion and that great chemistry and partnership, obviously between Paolini. They're great friends off court as well, which helps bode well with their chemistry. So yeah, going to be very hard to see them getting knocked off their perch. But yeah, from an Aussie perspective, it's disappointing because we usually see the likes of Ebden and Pearce, for example. They usually make some deep runs at times. Obviously, we know the Jordan Thompson and Max Purcell situation, which is unfortunate. But yeah, from that side of things, it's disappointing that we don't have an Aussie waving the flag this deep in the tournament.
Oh, that is true. Speaking of Aussies, I talked yesterday about Emerson Jones. She did bow out in her semi-final against Austrian Lily Tagger. So that is the end of all Aussie hopes. Unfortunately, it ties a bow on those Christians. So I guess it's probably time just to move on to the women's singles final, which will happen Saturday night Australian time. We're looking forward to it, and does pit together two of the form players of the tennis world at the moment. We see Coco Gauff up against Arina Sabalenka. This is an interesting one. It's tied 5-all head-to-head. Their most notable clash, the 2023 US Open final. Gauff came back from behind to win her first major. Sabalenka did level this ledger, though, at 5-all recently, just in early May, with a straight sets victory in the Madrid Open final last month. And it kind of brings together two contrasting styles. Sabalenka, we know the raw power and aggression that was evident in that dominant finish in the semi-final against Iga Swiatek. Gauff, on the other hand, she's got exceptional movement. Her defensive skills are almost unparalleled, and they've served her really well throughout this clay court season so far.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting tactical battle because, as you rightly pointed out, Sabalenka breezed through that third set against Fiontek just with the sheer power which we know she possesses, right? She can blow anyone off the court. The games are usually, or pretty much every time it's on her racket, right? So I think for Goff, the way to neutralize that is her movement. And you mentioned as well, you highlighted her defensive skills. That's going to have to come into play in this matchup if she's to have any chance of, winning this match against Sabalenka. You alluded to the US Open final a couple of years back when Goff won her maiden Grand Slam title in New York. And I mean, yeah, we saw Sabalenka smash her racket and throw it in the garbage can afterwards post-match. So she does get emotional, and perhaps that might fuel the fire to perhaps seek a bit of revenge in this one. Because I mean, coming in, I tipped Sabalenka to win this tournament just based purely off her form and just the consistency she's shown throughout the whole of 2025. Going extremely unlucky not to win that AO final against Madison Keys, and it just feels like the stars are aligning for her to finally win this French Open title, which she's been craving for obviously a few years now. Now that Iga's sort of out of the equation because of Sabalenka in the semi-finals, it's a golden opportunity for Sabalenka to really grasp this chance with both hands, and for Goff, she can see it as the same way. So yeah, in terms of the head-to-head on clay, both at one apiece, so it is pretty even, but I'd lean slightly towards Sabalenka in this one.
An interesting one. Neither of them have really seen too many hiccups on the way to the final. Just one three-set victory required for each, and some fairly comprehensive scorelines at different points along the way. Obviously, Sabalenka was, dropped that second set against Swiatek, which is, look, that's no mean feat. But the way she finished that off, beat Zheng as well, Anisimova. And then when you look at those opening 3 rounds, she did exactly what we expected of her in terms of clean, straight wins. On the other side, obviously, for Coco, that semi-final win, she ended that giant killing run of Bosson, the French woman, who I think she's ended up raising about 300 points at places in the rankings. Unfortunately, a little bit late for direct entry into Wimbledon, and that'll be interesting to see what happens for her, but that's another story we'll touch on when we talk tennis in the full show. Madison Keys was the one that took the 1 set off Coco, though. So it's interesting that both these players have come through in similar patterns, some fairly comfortable wins, a couple of ones where they've had to go deep in a set or here or there, but they've never looked, I would say, overly threatened, even when they've been lost a set in those quarterfinal and semi-finals respectively.
Yeah, for sure. And this is what sets up this clash nicely, right? I think both of their mentalities has been super impressive, coming into the tournament, especially Sabalenka, right? I mean, you only think back to a couple of years ago where she lost those couple of, grueling finals at Grand Slam level, and you thought maybe mentally, is she there? Can she cope? Can she get across the finish line? But, previously we've shown, she's shown this sort of bright side to her, funny side of her, the dancing off court with sort of the Instagram reels and all that sort of stuff, which has sort of, calmed her down. And she's admitted during press conferences that, tennis isn't the be all and end all for her anymore. Like, she understands that, yes, like obviously there's a lot on the line in terms of, obviously working towards that main goal of winning as many Grand Slams as possible. But at the same time, she's really focused on just, I guess improving and focusing on herself, right? Not worrying about the external pressures. And yeah, she has a great team around her. So I guess the same can be said for Coco Gauff. So young as well. I have to can't forget that Coco's only 21 years of age, right? I mean, she's still got her whole career ahead of her. It's sort of like she's been on the tour for a decade, and we're sort of judging her a bit harshly at times, when she does perform, below standards at previous Grand Slams. So, again, like I said earlier, it's going to be just a big chance for both of these women to win this title, given Iga's just been so dominant on this surface at the French. So, interesting to see who prevails. But who's your prediction, Chris, for this one?
Well, it's a tough one, as we said. It is that contrasting styles. I think if Sabalenka can get out of the gates hard against Gauff and get her on the back foot, it's going to go a long way to determining it. I'd love the story of Gauff taking that second, taking that leap. We've talked about, that US Open and what a breakthrough that was for her, but for her to win another title now on the Grand Slam circuit would be huge. And, obviously when you look at the rankings, Sabalenka is so far in front of everyone. It's kind of first daylight, second daylight now, the way the rankings are, and there's some interesting permutations in the rankings, which we'll talk about with some of the players like Swiatek and Djokovic and their movements post this tournament. But I've tried every which way to find a way where I can genuinely say that, my head and my heart align for Coco Gauff, but I just think that Sabalenka stacks up too well that, I can't say convincingly that I can't see Coco Gauff winning. I can't logically put a plan where that's who I tip or suggest. I think it's going to go to 3. I think Gauff will get there and get gritty, get defensive and take a set off Sabalenka, but the only way I see is if Sabalenka goes that way that she did in 2023, where she kind of not disintegrated, but started to fall apart mentally. Is that act at the end you talked about just before, where she, threw the racket in the bin afterwards. But it's a very different Arena Sabalenka in 2025 to what we saw in 2023. 2023 was the end of the old Arena Sabalenka, and 2025 is the new Arena Sabalenka, and she's been so dominant. We've seen that. She's got a huge gap, as I said, at the top of the rankings. So I'm going to go Sabalenka in 3. Would I be outrageously surprised? No, these are the 2 best women in the world. If Gauff can turn up and Sabalenka's a little bit off, that's all it will take. But I just think from what we've seen from Sabalenka, even against Swiatek, once she got the momentum back, she just turned the absolute screws on her in that semi-final. So I'm going to go 3 sets to Sabalenka.
I'm going to go with Sabalenka in straight sets. I just think back to the Rome final where Paolini completely outplayed Coco in that final. I just think Sabalenka has too much here, too much weapons that she can exploit Coco despite the great movement from the baseline. I'm tipping Sabalenka. Of course, I tipped it before the tournament, so obviously I'm not going to change now, and I'm sticking to my guns. So Arena to take out the title in Paris.
Not sure if you're reaffirming that or just gloating every time you keep saying that you tipped her before the tournament. But anyway, again, it wasn't exactly a long shot.
If she loses, then egg on my face. So
double down egg. But look, I would have been more impressed if you tipped Lois Poisson before the tournament to make the semi-finals. That would have been an impressive tip. Another probably, not a very surprising outcome in terms of the way it shaped up is the men's draw. Let's talk about the men's final. We've finally gotten the next of the new, or the next brigade, the top two, the big names that are coming through in Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz together at the business end. For so long they kept getting drawn when the rankings were sitting them on the same side of draws, and they still didn't make their way through often. Obviously, they got past the big stick in the wheel that is Novak Djokovic as well. This is an interesting one. Alcaraz holds the upper hand in terms of the matchup historically, but Sinner probably the ascendancy at the moment. That said, Sinner still not back and really tested. He's gone through this in a bit of a walk. Djokovic did give him a bit of a challenge in the semi-final, but it didn't really disrupt his rhythm. He's just seems so just laser focused and on at the moment, the way he's been performing, even against some decent opponents, obviously in a different class to him, but he hasn't dropped a set yet, whereas Alcaraz has gone to 4 sets in 4 matches, which is probably not a concern if you're an Alcaraz fan for me on another subject, but it's probably just typical of how Carlos can drift in and out of matches, which he can't afford to do against Jannik.
Yeah, I mean, Sinner's just been on a completely different level throughout this tournament. I saw a stat before. He's only made 2 double faults throughout this whole Roland Garros. So coming into the semi-final, he only made 1 double fault against Bublik in the quarters. And apparently, since 1981, when the stats were compiled, that's never happened before. So he's just shattering records left, right, and centre. And he just doesn't seem phased, right? I mean, that semi against Djokovic, I mean, you see the scoreline. Yes, he won in straight sets, but Novak actually played a decent game. Like, he was on some great shot making, and it was about nearly 3 hours and 20 minutes on court, right? And it was a straight sets win. So it just goes to show how hard Sinner had to work for it. But just the power is just unbelievable. The way he can hit winners off both sides, like he's got everything in the bag to trouble Carlos in this final. And I guess people allude to the fact that Carlos has dropped a few sets this tournament that he shouldn't have. He lapses in concentration, he dips in and out of games, but he's even admitted. He answered that question in one of the presses. He said, "Well, that's actually a benefit for me because I know that the game's on my racket. I can turn it on when I need to." So you can look at it from that perspective as well. So this is going to be a really intriguing final. I guess the final we all wanted in a way, just because of the entertainment factor, the storyline heading in. This is going to be the 6th straight time that either Sinner or Alcaraz is going to win a Grand Slam. You have to go back to the 2023 US Open to find the last time that none of these two won a slam, which was Djokovic in New York. So just goes to show the dominance of these two guys, only so young, 23 and 21 years of age respectively. It's just crazy what they're doing in the sport at the moment. And in terms of picking a winner, honestly, I'm split because Carlos, he turns it on against Sinner whenever they meet. He's won the past 3 or 4 head-to-head meetings. Obviously won their last meeting in Rome, the Rome final a couple of weeks back in straight sets, which was rather convincing, albeit we knew that Sinner was coming in a bit rusty given the 3-month suspension and all that stuff. But Alcaraz just seems to have the answers against Sinner. He seems to up his game in these big moments, in these big matches. So don't tell me to pick a winner because I'm honestly torn which side to lean on because they've just both been so just super impressive. I'd probably tip 5 sets, but seriously, it's a coin flip. It can go either way.
That's the whole reason we've got you here, Christian. Come on. Heart or head, one of the two. We're not going to crucify you if you're wrong because goodness knows that's about the only thing that makes consistency as a pundit on the Chris McPherson show is being wrong.
I mean, I'll lean towards Sinner only because of the fact that he can't keep losing against Alcaraz. I mean, surely he has to find the win one way or another. It's got to come eventually, right? So, and I guess this lopsided narrative of Alcaraz, always beating Sinner recently, and it's not really a rivalry as people make it out to be. So I want to see that script flipped a bit and maybe see Sinner prevail. Obviously, Alcaraz is the defending champion. We can see a new winner potentially, but like I said, it's just extremely close to call this.
Well, there's a couple of cool narratives that can come out of it, as you say. Obviously, Alcaraz has won the last 4. He beat him here in the semi-final last year in 5. And look, if it goes the distance, I'm going to be one happy customer because that means there's been some enthralling tennis because we know that these two guys aren't going to be just a damp squib of a 5-setter because you do get those occasionally at this end of a tournament. But again, Alcaraz has the edge on him on clay, has the edge on him overall. The one thing that makes me want to tip Sinner and want to see Sinner win is obviously the Australian Open result, which then means that something very special would be alive heading into Wimbledon. which, Sinner is a better player than he was last year. I think we can all agree on that. It's just about how he's building after that ban. So just for me, my heart is saying I'd love Sinner for that story. My head is telling me that Alcaraz has that wood over him. But to your point, there's so little between these two that you feel at some point Sinner's got to get one back after that run that Carlos has had. But I just don't think this is going to be it. I'm going to tip Alcaraz in 5. As I said, I'm going to be happy if this goes deep. It promises to be one of the absolute classics. And, like you said, that record that they're starting to build, it's reminiscent of the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic sort of run that they went on, only a few years ago, where all of a sudden it's like the quirky state of trying to work out who it was that, was the last person to win. And then we're going to be in a conversation of, in between those runs of the big 4, if you call it that, including Andy Murray, into the new, big 2, if that's what we're calling it at the moment. Who else has won a Grand Slam in the last how long? And that will become the fun trivia. Or, you might get someone that will nab one in the next year or two as these guys are establishing their dominance. And then it'll be a matter of, we might go a whole generation between someone else outside of those half a dozen players really winning one. So either way, it's going to be enthralling. I can't wait. So you've got Sinner in 5. I've got Alcaraz in 5. So what will probably happen is that someone will probably win this convincingly and cleanly. And we know that Coco Gauff's going to win the women's because we've both tipped Arena Sabalenka. So as always, Christian, a big thank you. As I said, we might try and get together during the week in the lead up to our regular weekly episode and just unpack this and what it all means after we get through the finals. But as always, I really appreciate your time coming in for the French Open Daily Doses that we've done. And I think we've only missed one across the 15 days, which is, I think, a pretty solid effort. So a big thank you again. And, just encourage everyone to tune in, get into those doubles finals as well. I think the men's doubles will be an interesting final in the lead up to the women's final tonight. And, enjoy the peak of it and then catch your breath again because we'll be back into Wimbledon in no time. So, a big thanks again, Christian.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. And, we'll be back on in no time. Not really in terms